Today we are learning basketball with Ricky O'Donnell at SBN_Ricky on Twitter. He is the writer, editor, and associate director of programming at SB Nation, covering college hoops, covering NBA development. One of my favorite things about Ricky is how amazing he does a job of covering the NBA draft pipeline from prep to pro, like getting that grassroots to the college experience, the in-person perspective, scouting games, and getting to know these athletes as people, and just does a great job sharing all that and storytelling with SB Nation. So I wanted to, highlight that right off the top. Excited to hear about, Final Four, some Chicago sports and some Michigan, some UConn, and we'll draft some of the best 2026 bigs to end the pod here. But first, how you doing, Ricky? And, how was your Final Four experience?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. I've been lucky enough to be at SB Nation covering college basketball going back more than a decade at this point. So March Madness to me is always the busiest time of the year for me at work. It very much feels like a sprint for about a month or 5 weeks, starting with the conference tournaments through March Madness. And I was lucky enough to get a credential to cover the Big Ten tournament this year, the Sweet 16 in Chicago as well, and then the Final Four in the national championship game in Indianapolis. It was the sixth time I've covered the Final Four. The first time I did it was in Indianapolis in 2015, back when Kentucky entered with an undefeated team with Karl Towns and Devin Booker, and they ended up losing to Wisconsin, and then Duke won the Natty, led by four freshmen, including Jahlil Okafor, Tyus Jones, Tyson Allen, Justice Winslow. So, my main takeaway is that I'm just so lucky and so fortunate to still be doing it all these years later. And I love covering the Final Four. It's always such a treat. The access is tremendous for the Final Four, so it's great for reporters. Really media-friendly event in general. The locker rooms are open after every game, so you could go in and talk to the players, which you can't do during the regular season. Like when I covered Michigan at Northwestern during the regular season, you get one or two guys at a press conference and that's it. During the Big Ten tournament and March Madness in general, and of course the Final Four, it's just open locker rooms and much better media availability. So it was awesome to do. I feel super lucky, no doubt about it. My job has changed in a lot of ways since I first started doing it. It's more managerial based now and a little more corporate, but it was pretty awesome to get out there and to, get some firsthand looks at some great draft prospects and to be around Michigan throughout their national championship run.
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome experience. Well deserved, putting in the work, talking to, seeing your profile picture now. It's you talking to LaMelo when he was an early prospect. You've been here doing that, putting in the work. So shout out to you. Before we dive into the more things Final Four, I gotta ask you what was your reactions did you get from the viral WGN performance there? What happened there? Did they just ask you like, hey? We need like 10 minutes to just tear down Chicago basketball operations, and you're like, yeah, I got you any time. Is that how did that come to be? And like what kind of comments did you get back from Chicago fans?
Yeah, well, I was in Indianapolis covering the Final Four, and I was working on a big story on Yaxel that I ended up publishing. You could read it on SBNation.com. Just this huge Yaxel Lendeborg feature that I was reporting throughout March Madness. And as I was maybe like 80% done with the article, the news drops that the Bulls fired Arturas Karnisovas. Now, I've been slamming Arturas at every opportunity in Chicago media. People, like to ask me to do TV or radio sometimes, and I always jump in and say that the Bulls need to fire everyone and that AK is the best executive in the NBA and that the Bulls can't move forward until they fire this guy. So I was thrilled that they actually fired him. I was pretty surprised. And shout out to Jayden Ivey. Unfortunately, I know Jayden Ivey's going through a lot right now, and hopefully Jayden Ivey is good and can, continue
Yeah,
to,
wish
get
the
over
best for
what
him for sure.
he's experiencing. I wish the best for Jayden Ivey. But it does feel like in the fallout for the Ivy situation that it sort of cost Arturas Karnisovas his job. Now, of course, it never should have come to this. Arturas has just been a terrible lead executive for the Bulls for years. If anything, their only mistake is they should have fired him, 3-4 years ago. So I was happy to go on TV and slam Arturas like always, but kind of exciting for the Bulls right now. Like the end of the season just worked out pretty well for him. They ended up getting the 9 spot in the lottery, which it was between them and the Bucks, the last couple weeks. So they're going to have a 20% chance to jump into the top 4. And then if the Blazers can get into the playoffs, the Bulls get their first round pick from the Lowry Markkanen trade way back in 2018. So that
Oh
one
wow.
hanging over the team for so many years at this point. And if Portland can beat Phoenix, the Bulls will get that pick. Otherwise, the Bulls will have one more chance, likely against the Clippers, I think, for what would be the 8th seed. So, yeah. And then, most important of all, they just fired AK. So they're going to have to hire a new GM. And I don't really have too much insight into where they're going to go with that yet. I think that the Bulls still don't even know who they're going to hire as GM yet, but they definitely had to move on from Tarris, and I think it's just generally a very good thing for the franchise. So Bulls, for once, not totally stuck in the mud. Maybe a little bit of hope. Feels weird because it's been 10 years of trash for the Bulls, and now maybe they have a little glimmer of sunshine.
Hey, I'm sure any new direction just feels positive at this point, just to maybe have a direction of sorts, especially with the organization seemingly content with where they've kind of been most of this time. So before we hit the Final Four, any prospects that you like really would love to see in Chicago in this draft around that range? I guess 9th or 10th would be the likely range, but it's the lottery, it's flattened odds. Pretty much anything could happen here.
For sure. I mean, the Bulls desperately need to move up. I mean, they need a top 4 pick in this draft just as badly as the worst teams in the league, like the Wizards, the Jazz, the Kings. Like the Bulls are as strapped for talent as any team in the NBA. I really think. So if they can move into the top 4, I think the top 4 of this draft is all awesome. I'm a Cameron Boozer guy, so I would take Boozer at number 1. I think it's probably more
Oh yeah.
likely that Boozer falls to 3. But even if the Bulls could get the 4th pick, which would likely be Caleb Wilson, I think that would just be an incredible talent boon for them as well. So ideally, they move up and get one of those, big 3 or big 4 prospects. If they stay at 9, I like Mikal Brown for the Bulls at number 9,
Yeah.
point guard out of Louisville. I think that I'm more drawn to him than some of the other smaller guards in this class, like LeBaron Philon, like Darius Acuff. For one, he's got a little bit of a size advantage on those guys. I also think he's potentially the most dangerous pull-up three-point shooter. He shoots threes with a very high volume. I think he's a better shooter than his numbers indicate at Louisville, as he battled the back injury throughout the season. I also think he's a super creative passer, and just seeing the ways that he finds passing angles that most other guards wouldn't, I think is sort of a sneaky indicator of upside long term. And I really liked his ability to get to the rim this year and to get to the free throw line. So Mikal Brown definitely has got some downside to him. His rebounding numbers are terrible, so I don't know if he's going to be a plus in the possession game. He was older for a freshman, so if you really value youth, and I typically do, he was probably the age of a sophomore playing as a freshman, which I think is another thing against him. And then the back injury is really scary. Like, how are you 19, 20 years old and you already have a back injury that was lingering the entire season?
Hmm.
So some fair questions about him. Of course, Philon and Acuff and Christian Anderson and Bennett Sturts and all these other guards, they also have questions as well. So I really like Mikal Brown. I'll probably have him number 6 on my board,
Okay.
behind the big 4, then Kingston Flemings. Then I'll probably have Mikal Brown at number 6, or at least that's where I'm thinking right now. And then maybe it was just because I was around Michigan so much during March Madness, but it would be nice to get Aday Mara at number 15. The Bulls
Ooh.
badly need a center. I don't think the Bulls are in a position to draft for fit. They just need the best overall talent. But they definitely do not have their big man of the future on the roster right now. Jalen Smith was phenomenal this season for the Bulls. He's my favorite player on the team, probably, and he was one of the most pleasant surprises for them this season. But, he could play the 4 as well. And just getting someone with Mara's size, 7'3", 7'7" wingspan, someone who could really protect the rim well in drop coverage. I was impressed by his finishing throughout March Madness as well. I think his hands are pretty good. His baby hook is not automatic, but it's solid. You could count on it to go in. So I do think he has some scoring upside, despite, pretty bad touch from range. Can't really make a free throw, though he did get better in that department as the season went on. Not really a 3-point shooter yet, but he did make a few of them this year, unlike his first 2 years at UCLA. So I just think it'd be nice to get a 7-3 guy and have him
Right.
attack the offensive glass. Mara is such a special passer for someone that size. Could really juice the transition opportunities, which is something the Bulls have really leaned into under Billy Donovan, is playing at a super fast pace. So I think Mara's, his outlets are second to none. It's like prime Kevin Love out there throwing touchdown passes left and right. So I would like Mikal Brown and Aday Mara. If the Bulls don't move up, that's at least my initial reaction to what they could do with those picks. And they're going to have a lot of good options, though, because this is a very good draft class. It'd be a great year to have 2 picks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a fun one. The Mikal Brown, to hit on him first, like definitely an exciting prospect. One of the more exciting 3-point shooters I think of the draft. And you mentioned the underrated playmaking, like some real like point guard type of offensive engine gravity type of guy there that is a real threat. So I think I'm a little higher in the guards of like Phylon and even a Buko Okori is really caught my eye. I'm sure he's caught yours as well. Christian Anderson's fun too, but these guys are also talented. Like it's not that you can't go wrong because that is the draft. Like there is a kind of some right answers, but at the end of the day, like if you believe in the talent, the work ethic, and the skill set matches kind of what your team can provide opportunity wise, like there's a lot of reasonable bets, I guess, to make in this class with all the talent in that sense. And I'm glad you mentioned Mara and how high he can now be drafted, roughly at 15, because that was really kind of my next question to transition to the Final Four a little bit was, what is it about Mara's run that saw his draft stock rise so high or so up and down? I think you mentioned in the article like he just before he went to UCLA that he was projected to be a one and done top 10 pick in the 2024 draft after FIBA. And now he's risen back up to kind of that late lottery level. And how much of it, I guess I have two more questions. You answer whichever one kind of feels right. How much of it is he's the best center in a guard and wing heavy draft class that is pushing up his stock? And how do you view him compared to some of the recent big man prospects that have come out, like, the Zach Edey versus Klingon? We got a big title game recently. Kalkbrenner had a lot of success in the, 32nd pick for the Hornets this year as kind of a spot starter. I kind of would have him somewhere in between there, but in that same traditional big man role, but still not just an old school big man. Like he has some modern touch around the rim and interesting, fundamental set. So, what is it about Mara's game that has seen his, stock rise again on top of this, great run?
Yeah, I was really high on Mara when he came to the United States to play college basketball at UCLA a couple seasons ago. Just watching his FIBA tape playing for Spain internationally, I projected him as a top 10 pick in my preseason 2024 mock. That, of course, did not happen and looked like an absolutely terrible call on my part because Aday Mara could not even get off the bench from Mick Cronin. Fast forward 2 years later, and Mick Cronin's the one who looks like a bozo because Mara immediately flashed as an obvious first round talent as soon as he started to get an opportunity to play at Michigan. And, Michigan just had a really interesting situation this year where Dusty May went out in the portal and he recruited 3 guys who were basically centers at their last spot with Yaxel, Morez Johnson, and Mara. And they all fit together really well. That's one thing I've been thinking, evaluating the bigs in this class, is as the league sort of indexes more on offensive rebounding and more on the possession game, that it's really important that bigs know how to play with other bigs. And you could look at Mara in first blush and say, well, he's not going to space the floor. He's not a shooter. So can he really play with other bigs? But of course, for Aday Mara, the signature skill is his passing. And you saw that, throughout the Final Four and the whole season, really. Just the outlet passing is the first thing that stands out, and his ability to juice transition opportunities. He's so good in that department. And then I love his passing at the top of the floor too. Like you could space him out there and he can, zing passes into cutters. He even put the ball on the floor at times a little bit. You take 1 or 2 dribbles and attack the basket. And I think he's a good short roll passer too. So Mara's passing is probably one of the top overall skills in this class, I would say. He certainly has some deficiencies as a center. Like I don't love his body. I think, despite the length and the height, he kind of has a high center of gravity. And I wonder how that's going to affect him at the NBA level when you're playing against bigger and stronger bigs. He doesn't have great touch, and I look at free throw percentage for that, even more so than 3-point percentage. And he was a really bad free throw shooter throughout his college career. I did note in my story that for the last, whatever, 2 months or something, he was up to 74% from the foul line. So he did show some improvement as a free throw shooter in the second half of the season. He also spoke about, just that he makes all his free throws in practice, and he couldn't figure out why he couldn't make them in the games. And Dusty May started making him take high pressure free throws to end practices at the end of practice. And then he started to see more improvement, and May really invested in him.
Everybody runs if you don't make 3 free throws, Mara.
Yeah, that's it. So I'm a bit worried for sure that, he doesn't have great touch as a scorer, and that he's just pretty slow when you're that size. But with that being said, I still think drop coverage is an effective form of coverage as a foundational piece. So he's not going to have coverage versatility, but he could be really good in drop coverage. And when you got a 7'8" wingspan, you can really close the gaps, on floaters or pull-up shooters if you're playing in a little bit deeper drop. Love his passing. I think he can score inside. I like his offensive rebounding. It's funny you bring up Edey and Clingan, because for SB Nation, heading into the Final Four, I wrote a story about how the 2024 national championship game between Zach Edey and Donovan Clingan has really molded college basketball in the time since, where now most of the best teams had some sort of element of smash mouth basketball to them. You could look at Krivas at Arizona, who I think should be another first-round pick in this draft. He was 7'2", 260, long arms, just super powerful player. Obviously, Michigan going with 3 centers. Then you had Illinois. They were the tallest team in Division I this year, according to KenPom, their data, just in terms of average height of the lineup. And then, Florida, they were probably the best team not to make the Sweet 16 or whatever this year. They were number 1 seed. Having Chinalu and Alex Condon, they just had a huge front line. Then you had Duke with Ngongba and Boozer. So I think that size is really important in basketball. There's some groundbreaking analysis for you. When you got size and length, that's important. To me, if you want to win the college basketball national championship, get a 7'3" guy. It sort of seems like a and there's just not that many of those guys alive. So I think, even extrapolating it to the NBA, I would be tempted to say that Clingan and Edey go 1-2 in a redraft. Now, I know that's a hot take, because a lot of people would take Steph Castle. A lot of people would probably still take Alex Sarr, who I think those would be worthy choices too, for sure. But I really like Clingan's overall defense. I think Edey has been just a plus-minus monster when he's been healthy for Memphis. So I think, Clingan and Edey have shown that they can be successful in the NBA as long as they can stay healthy, with Edey in particular. And I don't think Mar is quite as good as those guys, but he's probably pretty close, and he's unique in his own ways. So, yeah, I mean, if you get him with the 15th pick, or he's a mid-first round pick, I thought he really acquitted himself well in March Madness, especially in that Arizona game in the Final Four. He was dominant. So I think he helped himself in March Madness as much as any individual player.
Absolutely. I mean, Mara was March Madness biggest riser. I mean, he was, almost embarrassing his early matchup with some of the post moves that he was pulling off in the mismatch, and just dominated really throughout, as around the rim especially, and like you said, really impressive playmaker, able to find the open man from the post and keep the ball moving. It's interesting with some of the size stuff, with Michigan. Dusty May also did something like this with Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden last year, with kind of this double center lineup and 2 future pro bigs. I wonder, you mentioned all those teams full of bigs, and a lot of those are future pros. I wonder if some of the trade-off for, size over spacing maybe works a little better in college for one reason or another. Maybe if there's less, if every team isn't playing 5 out, you can maybe make up for some of that advantage a little bit at that level. And maybe that's part of it, because like you said, Keaton Wagler's flanked by four 6'10", versatile wings that is kind of a modern NBA type idea, and it works pretty well at the college level, but that's probably the more versatile, I guess, option of them all. But all those teams with all that size, um, it's impressive and it's interesting. That's where the league is headed. But like you said, I think it is partially headed back that way towards the pros too. To me, it's still just finding that two-way floor balance of having enough spacing and defense and no flaws in your game, but maybe you can get away with a little bit more of a weakness. I think at the college level, but it's interesting how effective Dusty May's system, for example, has been, like you said, playing guys that were basically three centers in a lineup and not having a problem with spacing or anything like that. And to that point, one of the big reasons Yaxel Lendeborg came back to school was to prove he could be a 3-and-D, a versatile defender, a 3-point shooter on top of the incredible defensive impact he already had at his previous stops. And that was something else you wrote about. And could you hit on some of how he impressed scouts in that way, and just getting to know these guys a little in person at the locker room, what they were like, maybe as teammates talking about each other?
Yeah, I wanted to write a big story on Yaxel because I thought Yaxel was the second best player in college basketball this year behind Cameron Boozer. There's also just a lot of talk about like his character. And I found a lot of that to be unfair based on my interactions with him in the locker room. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I know Yaxel or that I think he's a great guy or anything like that. But I do think that he was honest and transparent and self aware in his media comments. And I was around him a lot, like I said, covering Michigan throughout March Madness. So I just asked him straight up, I'm like, what did you hear from the NBA scouts at the combine last year? And sort of when did you know that you would not enter the 2025 draft and that you would go back to Michigan? And he said that the scouts told him his age would not be an issue this year, that, he was already going to be a 23-year-old rookie. So it doesn't really matter if he's going to be a 24-year-old rookie. They wanted to see him shoot way more threes. And they wanted to see him play more versatile defense instead of just being a center, show he could guard all over the floor. And you got to think he accomplished all those things at Michigan this season. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think off the top of my head, he took something like 3.5 threes per 100 possessions his last year at UAB. This year at Michigan, it was above 8 threes per 100 possessions, and his percentage actually went up. So he really transitioned from like sort of a point center type role at UAB, where he was just the biggest and the best player on the floor, to at Michigan, he very much adjusted his game to fit around Mara and Morez Johnson. And I think that speaks really well of his potential NBA translation. He also said, and I was surprised to hear him say this, but he's like, I'm not going to be a superstar in the NBA. You're going to have someone like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and he's going to need me to get stops and to space the floor. So I think pretty impressive self-awareness from Yaxel there. I actually do think he has a high ceiling because his physical tools are awesome in general. Like, the dude is 235 with a 7'4" wingspan, and he can be a high-volume three-point shooter. How many people can you say that about in the world? I think the average NBA center wingspan is like 7'3" or 7'4". So this guy's essentially as long as an NBA center, and he's able to play on the wing. Pretty impressive. Now, I know he's older, and I wrote about some of his, story about that too. He didn't have any scholarship offers out of high school. He barely even played high school basketball. Went to JUCO, a couple of years there, goes to UAB, ends up at Michigan. So he definitely has sort of a strange developmental arc. I think that it's another reminder that development isn't always linear. And I like Yaxel's whole package of skills. And personally, I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I know him, but I didn't sense any character red flags being around him. So that's just my 2 cents. The age definitely is a bit of a red flag in Caps' long-term upside, for sure. But, you got to think, if you're a playoff team or a team that wants to be a playoff team quickly, he should be a plug-and-play guy with his skill set and just with his experience. So I like Yaxel quite a bit. You can find my story on SBNation.com. Did a big feature on him. And, I think I mentioned that I'm thinking about putting Mikal Brown at 6 on my big board. I think I'm going to have Yaxel at 7. Like, even though he's older, I just think he's a really good two-way bet. And I think he's got the size. I think he's got the skill. And I think, he's a pretty smart player, pretty high feel for the game. So I really like Yaxel as a prospect. He'd be great for a team with quick playoff aspirations.
Yeah, I don't know if there's like a prospect that brings more like win now two-way versatility than Yaxel, right? I mean, like he just brings so many, good impressive skills right away. You mentioned the threes. He's gone up from 1.1 attempts his first game to 1.9 attempts his first season and second season to now 4.4 threes, 3-point attempts at Michigan, 5 in the tournament, 36% it's roughly gone up with the volume, and then 47% in the 5 games or the 6 games in the tournament. The free throw percentage indicators are all pretty high for a 4 or 5, like five free throws or 5.5 free throws per game at UAB for 2 years at 79.7 and 75.7, and then 4 free throws for 82% this past year. And I think it's really impressive when you think about it that like with the volatility of the three ball, how good the combination of like the shot opportunities that Dusty May's system has to provide, playing with that little amount of spacing to get good looks for Yaxel to improve his 3-point shooting, because that's like a promise you probably made him coming in if that's what he's hearing about what he needs to prove. And he did that, and he followed through with his touch to do it. And I think it's an example of like, did he develop as a shooter, or did he just have the opportunity maybe to show he could shoot in better shots that might be closer to what looks like catch and shoot looks off a Shea, like you mentioned, or at the next level. So that's really impressive about his ability to just kind of show up and produce 3-point efficiency when it can be that volatile as well. So that alone is impressive. I'm with you on his stock. I think I had him at like as high as 5, and through the process I've dropped him to like 10. I'm sure I'll end up somewhere in between there by draft day. But the thing that I keep coming back to is above, and that kind of keeps etching him just above a lot of these guards is that two-way versatility. Like some of the similarities to Aaron Gordon. I'm not trying to make a direct comp, but what's interesting is like he had to go prove something that Aaron Gordon was asked to prove kind of in Orlando once upon a time next to a Serge Ibaka and a Nikola Vucevic, to go hit threes and be versatile, and it didn't work that season. Now he's become that for next to Nikola Jokic, and that's a credit to AG's development. But I think it just points out how hard it can be to really like do that, even though it's a totally different situation and level. But I do like Yaxel for a lot of the reasons that I like AG. Like I could see him kind of filling a similar role at that next level as like a versatile post up scorer. His playmaking is really underrated, like or if not underrated, just really like unnoticed or something, because he's so strong and such an incredible impact defender, play finisher, dunker. Like he'll just hit these like money transition full court passes, or like just hit a dime for a cutter, like it's nothing. And so I think that versatility, the team first play finish, the team first two-way play, like he impacts the game on both ends. He has very few holes in his game. Like he can be versatile scorer, efficient shooter, versatile defender, strong defender at the 3, 4, 5. Like, what's not to like kind of thing in terms of just like where are the holes? Like, obviously, he's not a self creator, but as much as a ultimate play finisher, but he can do some of that stuff. So I'm definitely interested to see where he lands. I definitely agree. I like to see him like in a win now situation, like on the Warriors or something, where like he gets to play with everyone's better playing with Steph. But like I do think it goes underrated that there are some guys that are much better playing with a Steph or with a Jokic, and that's where their value comes into play. Is like if you have one of these guys, combining their forces just like creates a sum of its parts that's better than most. So that's interesting to see where his stock goes. Do you think they're both lottery picks at this point, or Mara is right on the fringes of top 20 at least?
Yeah, I think Mara is going to push for top 15 after this tournament run. Like, I think he's got a lot of momentum going for him. I think the league always wants to get bigger, and there's only so many people in the world who are his size. So I see Mara as a top 15 pick, and he'll be a lottery pick on my board. I think that Morez Johnson should have a chance to go top 15 too. Honestly, if he
Oh
comes
wow.
out. To this point, he hasn't declared for the NBA draft yet. But watching Michigan, I was around them a lot, and I couldn't stop thinking about the way the Knicks once reunited the 2018 Villanova team as much as they could. And why wouldn't an NBA team try to reunite this Michigan team? Like, these guys are gigantic. They all know how to play together. They have good synergy in their skill sets. And if I was a team, that's a crazy idea that I might try to do. Try to get Yaxel, Morez, and Mara all on the same team. Getting all those
I like
Villanova guys
it.
worked pretty well for the Knicks, and I think it could work in the NBA with the Michigan guys too.
Hey, why not? I mean, size, skill, effort, and chemistry like that. I mean, they fit well together, especially that front court. They felt like a modern front court. I mean, like I kind of thought Duke was the favorite because of their size and talent before, but they were a little banged up going in, and that left Michigan as just like feeling like this overpowering force, like just bigger and better than everyone else because of that trio. And it doesn't mean they were a lock to win. You still got to go through the gauntlet of March Madness, but if the schedule breaks right and no one can match you in size and skill, it's a good look. Let's I thought we could draft some of the best bigs. I want to hear your thoughts on. I know we covered some of the bigs already, but maybe we could just go through. I don't know our top three bigs or so in the class. It's not really the deepest big class. Hit any honorable mentions at the end, but for the sake of the draft, we've already drafted Boozer and Yaxel and Alan Graves on the wings side of the draft. So they have been counted as big wings, which leaves um, some guys like Ngongba, Cenac, Quaintance, Steinbach, Mara Morez, Krivas, Tarris Reed, and some other guys that are probably going back to school. I think, unless I miss one or there, but with the who do you think is officially the best big in this draft? I'll let you go with the number one pick. Is it someone we've already said?
I did not want the number one pick in this. I was happy to give it to you because it's a really hard call. Coming into the season, I thought it would be Jayden Quaintance, and he just had a nightmare year. But like, he was coming off an ACL tear. He probably came back too soon. But he has some offensive questions as well. So, defensively and frame and size wise, I really like JQ. But it takes a pretty big leap of faith, I think, to take him as the first big off the board this year. I really like Ngongba, and I think Ngongba is going to be a good pro, and he's one of the most underrated players in this draft. Some of the other guys you mentioned, Steinbach, I'm in on him too. And Cenac, I'd probably have a little bit lower, but I do like Cenac as well. I think I'm going to go Mar, just because he's 7'3". I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm center, give me the biggest guy. And I love Ngongba, and Ngongba to me is a lottery pick in this draft, so I would be tempted to take him. But he reminds me a lot of Wendell Carter. And when you pull up their two profiles, Carter is almost undeniably better. And then, there's just like, they have a lot of sort of circumstantial traits where they're both at Duke playing next to a top pick power forward. And they're both a little bit shorter for a center. And they were both just starting to flush out their perimeter skill in college. So to me, this is between Ngongba and Mara. And I guess I'm going to give the edge to Mara. I don't feel super confident about it, but the size and the length is just a game breaker to me. So I'm going to die Mara as the top big in this class. I've liked him for a few years now, and he finally rewarded my long-term faith during this March Madness time with Michigan. So, it's a tough call for sure, but I'll go Mara as the first big man off the board.
Hey, I mean, this is officially the Aday Mara podcast. Like he's the official big of the draft with the number one pick. Talking about who he is as a prospect, and I think that's just as reasonable as a pick as many that you said. I'm actually just as high on. Thought it was Cenac, but it might be Cenac. I'm rough with pronunciations, but I really like his skill set. Just his instincts as a rebounder and some of what he's shown. But I've caught more of his high school game, and he was dominant at different stops and showed he might need some development. But I think he could still be in that lottery range as kind of if he's ready to go pro, just because of the rebounding, and enough of a stretch shot like that. It's one of those things where I think the defense even openly said they kind of begged him to shoot in the matchup. But if you're giving up mid-range shots, to a jump shooter, like that's probably a good defensive strategy, and you got to knock him down. And jump shooting is a little more volatile than other parts of the game, I think. But even so, like that's something I think is like a room for development that's realistic. Is kind of what I'm getting at. Like even despite having a bad game or a couple games here and there, like I think he's shown some skills. So he's in that conversation for me, depending on the situation. Like the Grizzlies are projected around the 16th pick. That's one that could be an interesting fit after Jaren's kind of out of there with their flexibility with Coward and Edie at the 4. But like you said, I am gonna go Ngongba here. I think he deserves the next shot, especially since, like we said, Yaxel, Boozer, and Graves are not included in this exercise. Let's go with Ngongba. For the reasons you stated, I thought Charlotte might look at him if they end up with. I think they ended up with like the 13th pick or something around that range in some trade. So that could be an interesting kind of plug and play, versatile forward to add to their system. But like you said, Ngongba kind of makes a lot of winning plays on both ends, and just smart high field player, big two-way big man. I think he'll fit a lot of situations, and maybe there's some cases for higher potential offensive options in this class. But if you need a plug and play kind of 4 or 5 guy, he's up there. I think so. Well, let's go stagger the picks. You're up with the third pick here.
All right, I got to go JQ here with Ngongba and Mara off the board. I still think JQ could be one of the best players in this class.
Right.
He just had a really bad pre-draft year, and there's just no way around it. But when he was at Arizona State as a 17-year-old freshman 2 seasons ago, he looked like a no-brainer. Like, this guy looked like, I don't want to say the second coming of Bam Adebayo, because I think there are some meaningful differences between them, but coverage versatility, shot blocking, long arms, super strong, giant hands. He's got a lot of the traits you want. And I just love that. I feel like he just gives you so much versatility defensively. Like, he could play the pick and roll in any number of ways. I think I'm really interested to see what he measures at height-wise, because I feel like he's gone from like 6'9" to 6'10" to maybe 6'11". Like, the tape measure is not going to lie there. How tall is Jayden Quaintance? I'm interested in seeing that. But, I think his wingspan's going to be huge. His hands are going to be huge. He's got good physical tools. Offensively, question mark, for sure. I did think in the 4 games he played this year that he showed some improved offensive ability as like putting the ball on the deck and making decisions with the ball in his hands. Otherwise, I think, ideally he could be a short roll passer, but the offensive game leaves a lot of development. And the one thing he should be good at is just like dunker spot play finishing and then offensive rebounding. And if he's good in those areas and he's elite defensively, I think he has enough two-way versatility. So I like JQ. I think if you got JQ top 10 on your board, I really respect that, because I think I want to do that, and I may still end up there for sure. I haven't thought about it too much lately, especially because this hasn't played too much, in the second half of the season. So I want to still believe in JQ. It was just a bad pre-draft year for him, but, he tore his ACL. What's he supposed to do? So he should be pretty far removed from that injury now. He suffered at the end of his freshman season at Arizona State. I'm going JQ. Jayden Quaintance with the 3rd pick in this big mock draft.
And I like the pick, and I have I make comparisons to the Magic, if you haven't noticed. So he reminds me a lot of Jonathan Isaac in a lot of ways, good and bad, I guess. But a lot of the reasons you said, like defensive versatility and finding a role as a dunker spot play finisher, the offensive rebounds, the energy plays, and ideally develop as like a rim roller, a short roll playmaker, pick and roll, downhill roller type threat. Just being able to hit, like catch that short roll, catch the ball at the elbow and kick out as make a read and react in that set. Like you just need him to find a role offensively that contributes to winning, so he can stay on the court, because the defense is off the charts. And that's kind of where the comparison is. And there's not a ton of faith in some of the shot, like you said, in the scoring, but the defense at Arizona State, like you said, just, absolutely one of a kind, all time looking type big wing versatile defender. Like everything you want to see. So definitely an interesting prospect. And, I hope the right team, that seems like a guy like in the right system can really be unlocked. Like, take a Jalen Duren sort of, I think, like in Detroit, where that really worked out for his development, where he fell a little bit in the lottery, but like he's now an all-star because he's developed a little face-up game and short roll playmaker on top of that talent. Um, so where does that leave us in the draft? I'm going to go with the guy I just mentioned, Chris Cenac, for all the reasons with the fourth pick here. A little bit of upside star. The first time I saw him dominate the top 100 camp, I'm like, man, he's got a little Chris Bosh to his game. There's something here. Like he was hitting the stretch threes, the incredible rebounding instincts. I gotta like mention every time because like I think he's got the best in the draft. Kind of like Asa Newell, I think stood out last year for that instinct, and that's kind of their superpower that kind of separates them as like a prospect. It's like they have this one thing that they're elite at. Can they build out two-way impact around the rest of their game? And for Chris, I think he's shown some post-up fundamentals, some footwork, some scoring down there against mismatches. He can hit the pick and pop in the mid-range and stretch that out to three. There's enough there, I think, to trust some of the touch to develop there. Super young. I think he'll get stronger and tougher and be able to play the four and maybe even some five, if depending on the stretch skills and all that. And his grab and go playmaking was pretty impressive early on too. And he's he's had more of a kind of a development year almost at Houston. It seems like that's all they talk about is how much he needs to develop this and that. While they were really good in a loaded team, so it's cool that that's kind of seems to be maybe part of the Kelvin Sampson culture as well. Just focus on your player development, and we know where this is all headed, but we're going to be kind of a part of something there too. So definitely like the talent there, but I do think there's a reason he kind of fell here, and that's because of the play at Houston just didn't quite live up to the expectations, and that's how this goes sometimes, and especially because of just how loaded this draft class is. Like a lot of these guys might just have to wait a year to move up 5 spots because there's just too many good names this year. But we'll see for him. I think he entered the draft talks as of now. So I think it just takes one team to say, well, we'll take you about 16, like the Grizzlies or somewhere in that range, to be like, it's worth it, because there's obviously the big question about financial incentives for short-term college versus long-term NBA. But I think roughly lottery pick is a pretty good promise around that range, or a pretty good like bet on yourself to go ahead and be the lottery pick if you're getting that promise at any point. So who would you go with here for the next pick?
Yeah, good question, because it is between Hannes Steinbach and Morez Johnson. And I like both of these guys.
Yeah.
I think they're both cool. They're kind of like opposite players, where Steinbach's offense, I think, is really dope. Morez's defense is, his calling card. And I'm going to go Morez here because I feel like Morez is the most versatile defender in the class. He can really defend all over the floor. I hesitate to call him a 5-position defender because there's just not that many of those guys alive, but I think he's the closest thing this class has to a 5-position defender. So I just love his defensive versatility. I think he's going to be really good on that end. I've been following Morez's career for a while because he grew up in the Chicagoland area where, I'm based in the city. And so I knew who he was throughout multiple stops at high school, St. Rita High School here in the city, and then South Suburban Thornton. He finished up his career there. It was cool to see a prospect of his caliber actually not go to one of these big prep schools and actually just play local public high school, or Catholic high school too, during his high school years. So I've been following him for a long time, and I think that his defense is going to easily translate to the NBA. I'm not sure if he's a 5, and I'm not sure if, when he's a 4, do you pair him with a stretch 5 ideally? Or is he going to be able to develop as a shooter? I do have some offensive questions for him, but his defense rules. And I think that he's super long. He's super strong. He's really quick on his feet. And you just don't if you're an offensive player attacking him, there's just not very many points of leverage to get on him. I think he just sort of shuts off your water. in every way possible. So I'm taking Morez here. I'll say that I covered Michigan versus Northwestern earlier in the season, and in the pregame warmups, Morez was like totally unconscious from 3-point range. He was just hitting every single three in warmups, and he didn't take threes last year at Illinois at all. This year at Michigan, he was a low volume shooter, but I think he maybe took 1 3 a game or something throughout this season. Knocked him down at a respectable clip. I like his dunker spot finishing and just his ability to attack the offensive glass as well. So, yeah, Morez, give me the defense. If you want a rough NBA comparison, how about Beef Stew there in Detroit?
All right. I like it.
There's some comparison between Morez and Isaiah Stewart. So, give me Morez.
I like it. I was trying to think of the right ball of energy for power forward that kind of like plays at like on the perimeter more than, but it still kind of has like the skill set of a big or something. So like that's a good one, Beef Stew. I thought of Kenneth Fareed, but I don't think the skill set is close enough. But shout out Fareed just because he's an all-time fun name to shout out. With the next big man, I'm gonna go with Steinbach. Why not? I would have liked Morez here. He's a fun energy, ball of energy, play finisher type. But Steinbach is showing some like 3-point shooting, stretch big, promise as a potential big, a little bit of all around, can score and rebound and keep the ball moving. So there's something to like there. A big that can shoot always has potential. With Steinbach there, that's let's go one more each since you shouted out 2 more names. Could you tell me a little bit what you like about Krivas and Reed here to round out the pod or round out the draft at least?
with this pick. If we're continuing the segment, Krivas, what I like is he's gigantic, 7'2", 260, just a powerhouse player. It also makes 80% of his free throws, so it's good to me to be gigantic, and it's good to have soft shooting touch. And while Krivas, isn't taking threes yet, really, the fact that he's a 78% free throw shooter is really encouraging for his offensive development. And is he going to, I think a rough comparison for Krivas, and this would be a 100th percentile outcome for sure, but would be Zubac. And just like how he's super big, pretty mobile, great defensive rim protector. Krivas has some of those traits, I think. So if you get Krivas to like the 25th pick or something in this draft, I think you run to the podium to do it. I think that he's going to end up being one of the steals of this draft because, size is always at a premium. It's hard to find guys as big as him, and he's going to be a very good rim protector at the NBA level. I thought he was Arizona's best player this season, and they were just a freight train until Michigan dismantled them in the Final Four. So I think Krivas he's bound to be one of the top sleepers in this draft. I really think so. Whether he goes late first, early second, I'm sure Arizona is going to drop a bag of cash on his doorstep to try to get him to stay in college for another year. But I like him as a safe first-round pick for sure. So give me Krivas.
Absolutely. I mean, you're a big man rim protector like that, high impact player. I mean, that's always just like fun archetype to build around. That always tends to work. Doing the dirty work as the big man. With the last pick, I'll go with Tarris Reed. Could you break down his game, your scouting report, a little bit of what NBA scouts like about his game, and any funny stories from him or his teammates about him during the Dan Hurley practice article that you were working on as well during the Final Four?
Yeah, so I guess first off, I think Tarris Reed was probably the second best player in the NCAA tournament this year behind Yaxel. He was crushing it for UConn, and the reason UConn beat Duke in that Elite Eight upset, yeah, Braylon Mullins hit the shot that people are going to remember forever, but Tarris Reed kept them in the game, and I think he gave Ngongba a lot of trouble. He gave Cam Boozer a lot of trouble. Just a big, strong, physical center. Again, 260 pounds. I believe he's like a 7'4" wingspan guy. So low center of gravity, like he can establish position pretty well. He's got good hands. He can hit that hook shot over either shoulder. So to me, he sort of scans more as like an offensive big who uses his physicality on that end. He also makes an impact on the offensive glass for sure. Really good in that area. I wouldn't say that I have a great read on his defense yet, and that's probably why he's a second rounder, a likely second rounder in this draft if he does come out. or I think he's auto eligible actually. So yeah, he spent 2 years at Michigan, 2 years at UConn, so he should be eligible. But yeah, I think that Tarris Reed is just he's a workhorse inside. So if you get someone like him, late first, early second, I think that's a good pick. And yeah, when I was covering the Final Four, I went around all the UConn players during media availability, and I said, Dan Hurley's known for his intense practice tirades. Give me your favorite story that's going to stick with you from Hurley coaching you at practice. And a couple of the players, so I asked Reed and Solo Ball this question at the Final Four, and they both started laughing before I could even finish the question. They were looking at each other, laughing at each other as I was asking it. And they told a story that, they were doing a pick and roll drill one day, and Tarris Reed kept finishing with a layup. And Dan Hurley lost his damn mind. He wanted Tarris to dunk the ball on the pick and roll drill. He makes everyone run, and then they come back, and Tarris does it again. He lays the ball up instead of finishing it. Now they all have to run the stairs, and not just the players, but also the coaches, any of the other members of the staff. And as it's happening, Dan Hurley's just losing his mind, yelling at everyone. The teammates should be holding Tarris accountable to dunking at every opportunity, and the coaches should be holding him accountable. And he's yelling at Reed, and he's yelling at the players, and he's yelling at the coaches. And I thought that was just like a fun little view into Dan Hurley. Some people did not like that story. They thought that I was Dan Hurley's
the intensity, it never wears off. Never wears off.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully this didn't break up here at the end. I think
certainly, and Tarris Reed grew a lot under his tutelage, I think. So I like Reed as an early second rounder this year.
There we go. Well, he's known for his intensity. Had the the headbutt moment where it just felt go viral for that intensity. Just a fun moment known for just the antics, I guess. But it's pretty funny because it works. I think it gets results too. That's what makes it so funny. So thank you for the insight, man. It's been super interesting to hear what it's like, in around the Final Four and up close, and definitely appreciate your perspective scouting all these NBA prospects. Everybody be sure to follow Ricky at, I mentioned it off the top, now I lost it in front of me, at SBN_Ricky, Ricky O'Donnell. Thanks so much for taking the time to help us learn some basketball.
Thanks for having me.